Hi there, I'm Steven with Beyond Education Consulting, and today we're here to answer another commonly asked question: why is the SAT totally unlike any in-school exam? Let's go ahead and dive right on into the answer. So the short answer is that the SAT can be very difficult for students to confidently prepare for, and it really presents a lot of unique challenges that frankly a lot of school tests simply don't. Let's consider some of these elements. First and foremost, there's a lot of anticipation and expectation around the SAT. There's often not this kind of expectation or anticipation around any given school exam, save for maybe a final or a midterm. Everyone's performance will also be impacted by a timed test, and the SAT doesn't have just one timed portion, but really four of them. So from section to section of the exam, students are repeatedly put under the pressure of having to not only perform well, but do so under the duress of time. The SAT also has a lot of weight attached to it. We talk a lot about headspace and how it's very important for students to be confident, comfortable, having good momentum and pacing on this test. But at the same time, students know that this exam can really help and impact their college admissions process. So once again, there's a lot more riding on the SAT than really any one school exam typically has on it. Again, this is something that no matter how cool and calm a student may appear on their typical test taking, they're going to feel a little bit different about an official SAT. The other element we should add is that the SATs are not taken in a typical school setting. On test day at a testing center, the student may be at a school, but they're going to be in a large room, usually with some students who are kind of unfamiliar to them. And because everybody knows they're kind of taking the SAT, there might be some extra jitters in the room, a lot of nervous energy, and all those things also contribute to, as we like to call it, headspace. So that's going to be one of the reasons the SAT can be very difficult to confidently prepare for. Now, additionally, we have the questions themselves. In school, textbooks, tests, teachers, everything is there for a student to be supported, to get help they need in order to better understand concepts. School is designed to teach and to give students as much of a leg up as they can in any way possible. SAT questions, however, are designed specifically to challenge students and sometimes, frankly, even mislead them. This is because the SAT is designed by default, really, to go ahead and really push students to their limits in terms of their knowledge, in terms of their intuition, and in terms of their overall ability to kind of deal with SAT content. Several questions even include content that students really have little or no recollection of from school, including things like significant grammar concepts, probability rules. I can't tell you how often students have told me, I think I talked about this maybe one time in my class and then never again. And that's a very common sort of experience with SAT content, really in any part of the exam. Next, there is a whole new way to read on the SAT, which I know might sound kind of strange. If you're a parent, you probably imagine that the SAT tracks really well with high school curricula. It frankly doesn't. I know that might sound odd, but it generally doesn't. In some ways, certainly there will be topics on the test that a student has looked at, but in the case of the reading content, a lot of school reading focuses on critical reading, looking at literary devices and imagining what authors might be trying to communicate in sort of large ways with the texts. In other words, they might be talking about in school what The Great Gatsby is really all about, or what's Romeo and Juliet, what are the larger human themes at work there. The SAT does not want a student to do anything of the sort. On the SAT, we have to worry about something called analytical reading, which is very dry, very straightforward, and doesn't encourage any kind of imagination beyond, or consideration, I should say, beyond what is just right there in front of the student. It's a very different way of reading than most students are taught, and that can make for a really big challenge when it comes to the SAT content. Additionally, there's a diversity of reading topics, things that school frankly just doesn't have the time to cover. Philosophical elements, scientific studies, historical documents, even a lot of poetry shows up on the test these days. These are things that students have very little exposure to, and so when it comes to reading through them, they don't have a lot of precedence, they don't have a lot of background knowledge, and that can also kind of put them at a little bit of unease when going through the sections. And lastly, of course, vocabulary. Vocabulary has made a big comeback on this test, and most students, frankly, do not get a lot of vocabulary studies done these days. And lastly, the way that we have to improve on this exam will be very different from the ways we improve on school tests. The SAT is designed to be, as the College Board says, uncoachable. Now, to be clear, there is no such thing as an uncoachable test, but you can understand the philosophy of the College Board in how they build out the SAT year over year based on content, presentation, and some of the things I've already mentioned. So knowing that the College Board is aiming to really pressure students and make this test as tough as possible, there's going to be needs to change how we aim to improve on this exam. So I would say to consistently raise our scores, we can't just rely on repetition. We can't just put the reps in, so to speak, and think that we're going to know everything we need to know for the test. There's a great deal that goes into, as I mentioned earlier, maintaining a good headspace, applying certain strategies to questions, building a sense of intuition into math problems that's just not necessary in most math classes. And so ultimately, besting the SAT requires new models of behavior, new ways of approaching exams that, again, school just doesn't really ask of students. So as far as why is the SAT unlike any school exam? Well, there you go. I could go ahead and list a few other reasons, but I would say these are the main ones that I want to impress upon students and parents when they're considering taking up preparation for this test. We simply can't look at it the same as we would any kind of science, math, history, or English exam. It really is kind of a different animal. All right. Well, with that said, thank you so much for joining us here at Beyond Education Consulting. We hope you got some good information for all things academic, whether it be academic support or test preparation. Please visit our website and reach out to us. We're happy to help any way we can.